In this episode of Trekking Through Compliance, we take up Wolf in the Fold.
Compliance, the final frontier. Tom Fox is the voyager of Trekking Through Compliance. His mission? To explore the original series and seek out and share what it can teach you about compliance. Here's your host, Tom Fox.
In this episode of Trekking Through Compliance, we consider the episode Wolf in the Fold, which aired on December 22, 1967, and occurred on Stardate 3614.9. Story synopsis. Scotty, Kirk, and McCoy beam down to Orgellius II for therapeutic shore leave. There they enjoy Orgellian hospitality and belly dancing. Scotty becomes enthralled with the belly dancer Kara and invites her for a romantic walk in the fog. Shortly thereafter, Kara is found stabbed to death, with Scott nearby in shock holding the murder weapon. His fingerprints are the only ones on the murder weapon, and he has both a concussion and amnesia. The chief administrator of Orgellius II, the strategically important planet and only spaceport in the quadrant, Mr. Hengist, is put in charge of the investigation. Prefect Jarrus suggests that his wife Cybo use Orgellian empathic contact to learn the truth, but Kirk suggests they beam down a psycho tricorder to probe Scott's mind while Cybo meditates. Lieutenant Karen Tracy beams down to administer the test to Scott, but before she can do so, she is stabbed to death. Once again, Scott is the only one present and also does not remember a thing. The only other entrance is a door which has been locked for years. Kirk questions two men who were present in the cafe immediately before Scotty and Kara went out, but that leads nowhere. Cybo then holds the seance in which she senses a monstrous evil, ancient evil, devouring all light and life, bearing hatred towards women and all living things. She gives the name of Baradas, Keselak, Rijek, and then the lights dim suddenly. When they come back on, Scott is standing behind her and she has been stabbed to death. This time, however, Scotty did not black out. Hengist, Jarrus, Morla, Kara's father, and the landing party are then beamed aboard the Enterprise to have Scott analyzed by the ship's computers. The computers verify that Scott is telling the truth when he claims that he felt the presence of a foul, cold, evil creature. Morla takes the stand and the computer verifies he is not responsible for the murders. Kirk then decides to run the names spoken by Cybo through the computer. It identifies Rajak, Red Jack, as a name for the mass murder in the 1920s Earth. It also, Spock then speculates that a creature who derives nourishment from the emotion of fear is responsible for the murders. The computer verifies that such a creature could exist, and if so, would be a formless and could therefore exist as electromagnetic impulses. It cites the creatures of Alpha Canara 5 who subsist on the emotion of love. The computer also suggests the creature could take solid form at will, as the malicious crowd creature of Alpha Madoris can change from gaseous to solid. A search of crime records shows the following pattern of unsolved murders: 1932 Shanghai, 1974 Kiev, 2005 Martian Colony, 2156 Halopolis on Alpha and Irandani 2. Spock then notes that all of these lie sequentially between Orgellius and Earth. The computer then identifies Kesla as the name given to the mass murder of women on Deneb 2 and Baradas as the name given to mass murder on Rigel 4. Of course, Rigel 4 is the home planet of Hengist, the administrator. Computer analysis of the knife shows the blade to be made out of baridium, the handle of iranite, and identifies the inlay as originating from the hill people of the Argos region of Rigel 4. Hengist then makes a dash to get away, but is knocked out by Kirk. McCoy pronounces Hengist dead, but it turns out that he has abandoned a body and taken a residence in the Enterprise's computer. In order to avoid making the creature stronger by allowing him to feed on the fear of the crew, McCoy injects everyone with a tranquilizer. Sulu's reaction is typical and remarks that with an armful of McCoy's stuff, he wouldn't even be afraid of a supernova. The creature is purged from the computer and flees to a new body when Spock commands the computer to calculate the digit pi to the last number. Only McCoy, Java, Spock, and Kirk remain to be tranquilized, so Kirk surmises that the creature has taken up residence in one of them. McCoy agrees to inject himself, but when Kirk attempts to inject Jarvis, he is met with an outburst of "No, kill you all, die, make you suffer." Thus revealed, the creature returns to Hingis' body, but Hingis is quickly subdued and tranquilized, and Spock transports him into empty space with the widest possible separation. Kirk and Spock then must wait for 6 hours for the tranquilizer to wear off from their extremely happy crew. So, fun fact, this episode was ruined for me when Mr. Hingis, who was played by John Fiedler, died. It turned out that he had voiced Piglet in the charming Disney shorts about the Winnie the Pooh from my childhood. It was very difficult for me to envision any role where Pooh's best buddy was a mass murderer, killer, and a bad guy. So that happened a little bit later. Nevertheless, it certainly did impact the way I saw this episode. Interestingly, the writer of the teleplay, Robert Bloch, originally envisioned the Enterprise crew sipping drinks that had several different colored layers, much like a poussé café. The imbiber's mood would change as he drank each layer. This was dropped as being too complicated and costly to realize just for a quick moment of humor. According to David Gerald, in his book, The Trouble with Tribbles, network censors were concerned that it would appear the crew was engaged in drug use. The seance scene ends in darkness and a murder is very similar to a scene in Robert Bloch's classic short story, Yours Truly, Jack the Ripper. Before serving as a basis for the Star Trek episode, Bloch's short story was originally adapted into an episode of Thriller in 1961. And the 1999 episode of The Outer Limits, entitled Ripper, featured a similar story with the difference that the alien energy creature inhabited the body of the victims instead of the killer. A 2010 episode of Sanctuary called Haunted also used the same plot as the Star Trek episode, only the murderous energy being had formerly inhabited the body of Jack the Ripper and later took up possession of a building rather than a ship. So this theme has a long and storied history throughout science fiction, and it is an episode that I know you will enjoy. In this episode, I'd like to take a look at some of the ethical lessons from the episode Wolf in the Fold and how they can be applied by a compliance professional within your organization. Number one, the presumption of innocence. The crew immediately resists the urge to condemn Scotty despite seemingly overwhelming evidence against him. This speaks to the critical importance of upholding the presumption of innocence, and it's a fundamental tenet during any justice or institutional justice, institutional fairness. And that really holds true on the civil side of things, obviously, as well. Within companies, this principle should guide compliance professionals, disciplinary proceedings, and internal investigations. Employees must be afforded the opportunity to present their side of the story and be considered innocent until proven otherwise. 2, objectivity and impartiality in investigations. The Enterprise crew maintains objectivity and impartiality during the investigation, even though the primary suspect is a close colleague, i.e. Mr. Scott. This ethical approach should be emulated by organizational leaders and compliance professionals when conducting, by compliance professionals when conducting internal inquiries and internal investigations. Investigations must be thorough, unbiased, and free of personal biases or conflicts of interest. Maintaining this level of objectivity helps ensure fair and just outcomes. 3, respecting cultural differences and norms. This episode highlights the importance of understanding and respecting cultural norms and customs of the host planet, here Orgellius II. Similarly, organizations operating in diverse global environments must be mindful of local practices, laws, and societal expectations. Failing to do so can lead to misunderstandings, legal issues, and reputational damage. By embracing cultural sensitivity across cross-cultural lines, collaboration and compliance will both improve as well as overall corporate culture. 4, the ethical quandary of mind control. This revelation of a malevolent entity that can possess and control people's minds raises profound ethical questions. Within organizations, the ethical use of emerging technologies such as AI and ChatGPT or employee surveillance tools must be carefully considered. Leaders must ensure that the deployment of such technologies represents individual autonomy, privacy, and human rights while addressing the potential for abuse or misuse. Number 5, accountability and responsibility. Although Mr. Scott is ultimately exonerated, the episode underscores the importance of accountability and responsibility, even for those in positions of authority and trust. Compliance leaders must be willing to answer for their actions or lack thereof and ensure appropriate safeguards are in place to prevent abuse or misuse of power. This includes establishing clear ethical guidelines, whistleblower protections, and robust compliance frameworks to foster a culture of integrity and responsibility. By applying these ethical lessons from A Wolf in the Fold, companies can strengthen their compliance programs, promote fair and impartial practices, and cultivate a work environment that respects individual rights, cultural diversity, and the responsible use of emerging technologies.
If you enjoyed this episode of Trekking Through Compliance, you can help it grow by sharing it with the biggest Trek fan you know.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.